Hello, I'm Carly Krakow, and on behalf of Jadaliyya and the Arab Studies Institute, welcome to all of our viewers. I'm thrilled to welcome my guest today, the filmmaker and writer, Hind Shoufani. Today, we're going to start by talking about The Present, the BAFTA award-winning and Oscar-nominated short Palestinian film for which Hind was co-writer and editor. And I'm also really excited to discuss Hind's other work, including her award-winning feature-length film, Trip Along Exodus, which covers 70 years of Palestinian political history, seen through the prism of the life of Hind's father, Elias Shoufani, who was a scholar and leader of the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. And we'll also discuss some of Hind's projects currently in post-production, including They Planted Strange Trees, for which Hind returned to her family homeland in the Galilee. So Hind, it's truly a pleasure to have you here today. As you know, I've been looking forward to this conversation so much and can't wait to have you share more about your work with our viewers. It's also a critical time for Palestine, so an especially important time to talk about your work. Thank you and a very warm welcome.
Thank you. This is such an honor and a pleasure. It's been great getting to know you just, briefly over emails, and the amount of research you've done, the amount of time you've taken to study my work and to encourage it. Thank you. Thank you for the time and for the energy and for the space.
I'm happy to be. Thank you. Yeah, no, as mentioned, I love your work, and there's a lot I want to ask you about and different topics we're going to cover, so really excited. I did want to start by talking about The Present, which again is the short film you co-wrote and edited, and which was directed by Farah Nabulsi. And I had the pleasure of reviewing this film actually for Jadaliyya back in December 2020, and I actually discovered it through a screening at one of the many film festivals it was playing at online at the time. And as many of our viewers will know, it has since taken off around the world. Everyone can now watch it on Netflix. And it has been amazing to see the recognition this film has gotten. So congratulations again to you and the entire team. One of the things that struck me about this film is the subtlety of the writing and the way that the film clearly and beautifully depicts the injustices experienced by Palestinians under occupation, but through this simple and sorrowful story of a father trying to take a shopping trip in the West Bank. So a very simple premise, but the end result is so powerful. And I wanted to begin just by asking you about the writing process and how your experience and expertise with documentary filmmaking inform your work for The Present, which is a work of fiction, but is based on the daily realities for so many Palestinians in the West Bank.
Thank you. A few disclaimers to start with that. This was a story that Farah came to me and said, I have this story and I'm not a writer, but I'm a storyteller and I have this idea, and do you want to write it for me, for me? And it was a collaborative process. And so it wasn't something I came up with myself. I don't normally write fiction stories. I haven't done fiction in a very long time. I've been working in documentary for about 20 years. With a couple of forays into some fiction, but nothing really important since I finished NYU. So it's a long time ago, since my university days. And so it was a bit of a challenge. I didn't really think about it. I'm the kind of person who dives into stuff, not very thoughtful in many ways, a bit sort of all over the place. I just take things on, learn as you go. I do watch a lot of fiction. So I think that between my education, my literary background, having devoured, thousands of books when I was a child and a teenager, I was really a bookworm. I was very nerdy when I was younger, and in a good way. And my relationship to language of cinema and to like the idea of like an image, I think I was able to keep it subtle and to try and create something simple. That was not my first instinct. My first instinct is to very much layer things, right, to go into the sociological and the sociopolitical and the geographic elements of stories. My documentaries, the ones that are also coming in the future, are very much kind of all-encompassing and intense and dark and multi-layered, and they want to do too much. With this story, because it was Farah's voice and because it was Farah's intention and Farah's decision to create the story, and she was producing it and directing it, it was her lead in many ways in terms of the overall simplicity of the story. And I'm not a simple person, but I thought we did a good job of keeping this path of this one objective and keeping it personal. I can't really say what it was about me that made it work in a subtle way for audiences. I don't know really, maybe it was a westernized view of Arab cinema. Maybe it was because I was an outsider writing this in many ways. I am not someone who grew up in the West Bank. Unfortunately, I've not been able to grow up in Palestine. I've not been able to personally experience the things that I was asked to write. But I have been watching these injustices happen to my people for over 40 years, and in real time, through my neighbors, through my family, through television, through books, through poetry, through a lot of poetry. And so I think that informs a certain aesthetic. And with the imagination of Saleh Bakri's face and Saleh Bakri's energy in there as well, because I knew I wanted him to play the role. I can't really, I don't know how it became such a popular film. I think that it was a digestible film. I think the fact that it was short and did not have a dramatic ending. So in the beginning, for example, Farah wanted the main character to die. She wanted something really strong and very passionate and very dark at the end. And I kind of pulled her back and said, no, in all my training in cinema, you can't really do very dramatic things to personalities in short films because the character does not have enough time to bond with the audience, and the audience does not have enough time to really care for this character. So they'll be left kind of hanging if we do something very drastic to our main character. So I want to showcase the subtle injustices, the subtle humiliations, because it really is these everyday subtle humiliations that compound and compound and compound and compound. Many, 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 many films have been done about war zones, about bombings. Many films have been made about the impact on people's economic lives, the land, the uprooting of the trees, the prison system, the theft of land. I mean, all of that has been told and told and told and told. What I think the Palestinians need to focus on a lot is the everyday impact of the occupation on their love stories, on their families, on their moms, on their uncles, on their bodies, on their sexuality, on their relationship to God, on their relationship to flora and fauna. And so I think I brought all of that to the film. I think internationally, it was really heartbreaking for people because you have this beautiful young girl, because you have this kind father, because he has back pain. I had a lot of back pain when I was writing the film. So I wanted to include that in the film because I felt that everything you do in life is always much harder if you've got chronic pain physically. And so I put that in there, like let him go through this crazy, horrible experience, but also with back pain, so that it's 1,000 times worse, And and I called the young daughter Yasmin so that I could be guided a little bit by the energy of my mom, may she rest in peace, the beautiful energy of my Palestinian Nazareth mother. And and the process was very collaborative. I would write for a while. Farah would then take a look at what I wrote, suggest some things, remove some things, and we would meet and talk and talk and talk and talk for hours. And then I would go and write again. And of course, I wrote a 45-minute film by the end of it. Because I am who I am and I talk a lot and write a lot and think a lot, I wrote a 45-minute film, which then had to be condensed and condensed and condensed. But, a script is a blueprint. It's not a literary piece. It's not a poem you perform. It's not something that people tend to read on its own, except if you're a film student or, a film fanatic. Most people don't read film scripts. And so it's a blueprint, it's a guide, but then things change in translation, things change on set. We had to remove entire scenes. The ending was devised by the father of the actress, Nail Kanj. He was the father of he is the father of the actress, and he's the production designer, did a beautiful job of production design. And, there were elements also, he came up with the ending. We had different endings and we couldn't decide on one. And then collaboratively, he was the one who had the eureka moment, the light bulb moment. And I think the ending really makes the film stand out in many ways. And then, of course, one of the things I did insist on throughout the pre-production process was that we do film in Palestine and that we do film with Osama Abawardi from Philistine Films, and that we have an all-Palestinian crew and we don't go film in Lebanon or some other Arab country, that we keep it very, very, very communal, that we keep it very much in the spirit of how Philistine films work, with their local crews that they have been working with for years and years and years. And that we have that landscape, that very beautiful Palestinian landscape, which I think is key. And the last thing I'll say is that when we wanted to film the checkpoint scene, there was no way a short film was going to be able to budget, hundreds of extras. And so we just decided we were going to shove. I don't know if Farah decided or I decided, but it is a documentary type kind of experience that you just take the actor to an actual horrific experience and film them there. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but that's kind of some of the thoughts about how the film.
No, absolutely. No, thank you for that. I mean, it's fascinating to hear you speak about the process, to know about the different possibilities for the character, for the ending. And also, I do empathize with you in terms of my own writing experience with writing too much, and then that process of whittling away. And I think others watching who can relate to that know that that's not easy with any kind of work, to actually kind of, kill off your own work and set things aside. And the end product, as I've said, is so beautiful and concise. But yeah, I imagine that was a challenge because there's so much to tell, there's so much to share, but then you just narrowed it down to this very targeted story. So yeah, it's so interesting to hear about the work and the thought that went into that, and the different ways also that the film has been received. I'm interested to hear you talk about that, because I think maybe it's something we can talk more about later, but it does play an essential role in certain spheres. I think it has forced people to pay attention and to be interested that maybe weren't before, and that weren't following the Palestinian struggle and weren't familiar with these injustices. So it's interesting to think about the different roles that it's played.
No, for sure. It's gone far and wide. And I think that's a Netflix thing more than a BAFTA thing, or more than an Oscars thing, even though these are amazing experiences and definitely very surprising. And I'm very happy for the team, and I'm happy for Farah. But it really is the idea that it's on an accessible platform like Netflix all over the world, which people can just click a button and watch it. They don't have to go to Vimeo. They don't have to go to YouTube. They don't have to look for it. It's just there. And the Palestinian community really rallied. I mean, there are Palestinians all over the world, millions of us. And they all banded behind it. They all rallied. They all stood behind this story, and they shared it and kept talking about it. So it became a big deal, and it was amazing. And Farah is very good at outreach and impact and building building a momentum for these things. Something I'm not very good at, but she is, and her team is. And so that's really great. And I think, but also some of the concise elements and the fact that it was tight and short and succinct and intense was also in the editing, which I worked on for months as the editor. That was also a part where we threw out so many of our scenes and moments and things that we felt
painfully scrapping these things that you've worked on that don't belong.
So many conversations and arguments between me and Farah, and then Farah and Osama, and then me and Osama, and then me and Anne-Marie. Anne-Marie was consulting on the film. Anne-Marie Jasser was very generous and very helpful and consulted with us on the, take this shot out, take that shot out. And so, for me, it was such a wonderful validation on some level of my ability to create, even when I'm not leading the project, and even when I'm not in my comfort zone. I'm not editing documentary, I'm not working with an NGO, and I'm not writing poetry. I'm writing fiction and editing fiction, and this was new for me. And in that sense, I'm very glad that my first foray into fiction went to the Oscars. Not that I think Hollywood is all that. I think that they pay lip service and it's a terrible place in many ways, but still it meant that, millions of people paid attention.
I think all of this leads in perfectly, because I wanted to ask you about Trip Along Exodus, which, as I mentioned, focuses on your father, the scholar and PLO leader, Elias Shoufani, and you described this work as a film/poem. And I really found that spirit came through in the film. We can link to this so people can go check it out. I highly recommend that they do. There are a lot of beautiful narrations that you provide that accompany the imagery and the footage that you show, and also a lot of beautiful artwork and sketches in the film, which I thought was really lovely, and to have that dimension as well. But it's also extremely informative. I want to stress that in terms of aspects of Palestinian political history that it covers, but it's deeply personal at the same time. And you have interviews with your father and many other members of your family discussing often painful memories and situations. So I wondered if you would begin by telling us when you decided you were going to make this film. I was curious about that. And was your vision from the beginning to tell this story as a political tale interwoven with personal history, or did that evolve in unexpected ways as you went through the process? And perhaps it's both, but interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I think some of the beautiful elements of documentary, some of the most breathtaking elements of documentary is that you really don't know where the film is going to end up. Like you have no damn idea like where this film is going to go if you keep giving it the time it takes to get there. If you make a quick film for a television commissioned over a month, yes, you have this one story and it's done. If you want to make a film about the failure of the revolution that your father led and your relationship with your father and his opinion of Arafat and Oslo, you know, and you give it time, you know, a lot of things are going to happen along the way. So, I mean, I can spend hours talking about this. I really want to try and be a bit more succinct because I know that this is social media and, you know, no one is here listening to Hind's like personal trauma for 55 minutes. It can be very disturbing. And I have been on many panels where people were like, tell me about your mom's relationship with your father and the psychology of that romance. And I'm going, oh my God, what did I open myself up to?
Yeah.
Why did I make this film?
I think the film already opens you up to a lot. So I leave it to you for what you do and don't want to cover with that. But
no,
yeah,
it's fine.
A beautiful and personal film.
Thank you. You know, first of all, I want to say that this film was made on no budget. Zero budget and with no camera crew and with no producer.
Wow.
And with no institutional support. And it really was made by a group of people from Adam Shapiro to Ruwan Abu Rahmi and to like a whole variety of people who supported and cared and loved, and Perla and my editor and Bilal Hibri, my colorist. I mean, there were so many people, and Wissam Haroun in Dubai and all over the world, people chipped in, whether with footage or with helping me interview or with a camera or with $1,000 here or with some photos, or really 100 people came forward and offered, or I asked them basically very shamelessly to help me. I saw one photo on someone's wall. Can I have the high res of that? You know, someone drew a photo. Can I have, you know? So people came through because I think that people, love me, and more importantly, people love my father. It's not so much me, it's people love my father and they love Palestine. Also, another thing evident this week is how many people love Palestine. It's astounding in the world and it's so moving, you know? When I decided to make this film, I wanted to sit my father down. He wanted to wear a suit. He wanted to talk in Fusha. He wanted to be very classical. He wanted to be his intellectual academic self, his Princeton self, his PhD self. And he wanted to talk about the war and what happened in Lebanon and what happened in Palestine in 1948, and how he conceived of the idea of a garrison state and how he was teaching people about armed resistance and not religious strife, and how he was trying to take the movement into a socialist, radical leftist space back then, and writing academic books. And he was going to talk, you know, very like, you know, about my father loves to talk. This is probably where I get it from, you know, a lot of rhetoric, a lot of grand statements, a lot of explanations of history and politics and political science and theory. And slowly, the film evolved into my father in his pajamas, wearing like what they call a wife beater, eating like watermelon, crying over my mother's death, crying over, you know, my sister's like distance in the States, you know, crying over children in Gaza being killed in 2009. It evolved because I kept filming with him and just brought it. And I don't even know how to film. Like for $100, I would rent a shitty camera. Sorry for my profanity, and bring like a crappy camera, and I would just like film my father, having very little background in film. Press this, press that, hope for the best. You know, I'm not a cinematographer. I am now, but 12 years ago I wasn't. And so I just filmed it, and then the Syrian revolution happened, and I had no access to Dad. He wouldn't let me go see him. I had no access to him. He wouldn't let me see him. He wouldn't let me show up, and so I began recording phone calls. I began recording our conversations, which were very rare, weren't very often. You know, he was a pretty hands-off dad, and asking him how things were happening in the house, and, you know, no electricity, no food, no fuel. I mean, it was traumatic. It was horrendous now that I think about it. But when you're young and you're just living life and everything has always been this difficult in your life, you don't think that this is a problem. You just kind of go through it, you know, and people have said to me, you're very hardcore. And I said, no, it's just, I don't know any other way of being. Now I realize that, you know, this kind of survivalist can get through anything mentality is like trauma response. But then back then I just made films. And then I began collecting. I wanted to write poetry, and I wanted cartoons, and I wanted archive. And my father has beautiful archive of the revolution, Betamax and VHS. So I had to find people in Dubai, like old Emirati men who had Betamax players, who sat with me for like days and days while I digitized Betamax and talked to me about the PLO, like elderly Emirati men. It was amazing. It was amazing with the kind of support I got. And and then I realized I wanted glitter and I wanted macro, and I have I have 8mm from my childhood from my uncle Rami Khouri, the journalist, and I realized I had this insane amount of video and content that could be fused together to create a very playful attempt at telling the story of Palestine. That it was not going to be a serious documentary in the very classical sense. It was not going to be talking heads. It was not going to be traditional. And no one stopped me. I mean, there was no producer, there was no funder, there was no investor, there was no company, there was no distributor, there was nothing. No one stopped me. I made a 2-hour film full of like cartoons and, like things I wanted to say, and music and glitter and macro. Like there's like the inside of my eyeball is in the film. Like we did some macro of my hair in Berlin, when you shoot the inside of something, and I put my body into the film. And I wanted to also challenge my father to talk about the very terrible things he did, in his personal life, leaving his family behind in Palestine, marrying the cause and not my mother, and, not being there for us growing up as 2 daughters. And I've been alone since I was pretty much 17 in my life. And so I wanted all of that element, because it's also, I don't believe in these amazing heroes that become perfect.
Right.
No one is perfect. There's a lot of flaws. And I was inspired by Shakespeare, the idea of a Hamartia, where you have this kind of leader, this amazing guy who has like one flaw that brings him down. And of course, the Syrian war broke out, unfortunately, during that time. So then I couldn't ignore that. And so between 2009 and 2014, I worked on this project. Of course, I had a full-time job and other works and millions of freelance projects, but this was my ongoing thing. The last thing I'll say is I'm a poet also not by profession, but I've been working within the realm of poetry for a very long time. I call myself a wannabe poet because it's probably more correct. I'm a wannabe poet. But I wanted to mix that, I feel like the combination of poetry and film images is my favorite thing in the world, which will tie into a different project we'll talk about later. But if I was ever to do a PhD beyond my MFA, I would love to study how poetry and film work well together. And I think that's what I would want to do for the rest of my life, is in this region, which is not a form that many people work in, the idea of poetry, documentary. It's my preferred form of film. Does that answer anything? I'm not sure.
I think not only I was going to say, does it answer? I had some burning follow-ups as you were talking, but then you really, in a fantastic way, went into them. I was wondering about, what was going on in Syria and how that might have changed your process. And clearly it did have an influence, because again, I'm going to push it and we'll have the link, but people I think really will enjoy watching this for all the reasons we've discussed. But that was one of the things that struck me. I mean, this is a film that's personal, but it's about the Palestinian struggle through the eyes of your father, but Syria and that struggle and your father's references to his solidarity with the struggle and what was going on is also prominent in the film. And I think, if I'm remembering correctly right now, one of the first scenes was a conversation you had on the phone with your father after you weren't able to go visit anymore, and that was really striking. So yes, well, I hope people who haven't had a chance to see this yet, if they're watching this interview, they will go watch it, because as I said, it's visually beautiful, it's emotionally beautiful. So really interesting to learn more about the long process that went into making that an independent film, as well as you've as you've
It's
said.
a child's film. It's like a child's film. It's a child's
I think
film.
it's so funny that you're saying this because I want to hear what you're saying, but then people are going to tune in. They're going to be like, this is this really sophisticated, intense film about, 70 years of struggle but with also beautiful imagery and glitter and, all this artwork that you mentioned. But yeah.
It's like a scrapbook, like it's a child's scrapbook.
A scrapbook, yeah.
Everything is like
Absolutely.
stuck in there. Everything is plastic. Everything's fake in this film. I controlled every sticker. It's like a child. I've always been into arts and crafts. Like I'm a really artsy, craftsy person.
Yeah,
and so the film is like a craft project. It's edited like a book. It's edited in chapters, and each chapter has a name and a style, and it's got stick-ons. It's
Right.
really a scrapbook, and that's how I envisioned it. But also I was much younger when I did it and more naive and less sophisticated. And no, really, and my footage was like, we didn't have 4K technology. We didn't have really cool stuff, So it is a bit aged, but I think the power of my father's message is timeless. And to bring it back to Syria, my father has been calling for a revolution in Syria since the 70s, and since the 80s, he's wanted people to uprise against this kind of dictatorial oppression, this lack of freedom of thought, this kind of oppressive, I have a lot of paranoid tendencies and fear in my life. And sometimes I think, could it be because I grew up in Syria that I'm terrified of life on some level, Of course, if you live under this kind of regime where like this big brother is always watching you, and he's wanted people to revolt against that forever. And of course it got co-opted, and of course other factors came in, and of course it got super bloody. But at the heart of it, my father has always been for the liberation of people. And my father made no distinction between the people of Damascus and the people of Haifa and the people of Gaza. There is no distinction in his mind. He was a true pan-Arabist. And that's a term that people, a dirty term today in many ways. People don't believe in that. I think ethno-nationalism is very much on the rise, as evidenced by a lot of people in Lebanon and a lot of people in many places. And they want to be enclosed in their tiny insular communities. They don't want to think on a grand level. But my father did not think that Palestine was more important than Lebanon or Syria and vice versa. I think he thought that the liberation of one meant the liberation of the other. And that's why when I go to Tunis, I feel like these are my people in many ways, and I have grown up in Amman and in Damascus and in Lebanon, and now I go to Palestine and I live in Dubai, and also there are my people here too, And so I love that about my upbringing from my father. And so when the Syrian revolution did happen, it wasn't what he wanted in its specificity, in its form, but the intent, that fiery, like, we want to be free. Yes, that's like, it's the work of his life,
Yeah. As I mentioned, you've got a lot of exciting projects. So I want to ask you about another, and also on the topic of your work and your family in Palestine. One of your current projects is They Planted Strange Trees, for which you returned to your family homeland in the Galilee for filming. And I had the privilege of watching a short preview showcase of the film, and the diversity of perspectives that you feature just in this short 12-minute or so preview is incredible as you focus on Palestinian Christian communities in the Galilee. And I wanted to ask if you would speak about your time there a bit and the experience of filming this project. I believe you've finished filming and now you're working on the post-production. But perhaps more broadly also, I was interested to ask, again, here I am with the double questions, so I apologize for the curiosity. But some of your influences as a filmmaker, obviously, we've said poetry comes into your work. Art is hugely prominent in your work in a way that isn't true of all documentary filmmaking. So what I'm interested to know, what types of films and other sources do you look to as inspiration when planning and editing this project, but your work in general? So I leave it to you now from there.
So this is a very long story, and I think that there will be a lot of opportunities in the future when the film is released.
Definitely. To
talk about it more and to get into the sociological, the geopolitical, the religious elements of They Planted Strange Trees. In short, it's basically an investigation. Like, I am trying to discover the land of my father and mother. I am trying to find some solace for my life and the family there after being it's insane because I was born in Sidon, which is just an hour's drive from my dad's village. And yet for 40 years, I was not able to go to my dad's village really. And these borders that they've built are so nonsensical. Like, it's just so ridiculous. An American would never be able to believe that you can't travel an hour from your home to visit your uncle and aunt. You know, just insane in a car, you know, drive across London and you'll spend 50 minutes in a car. You know what I mean? And really, you know, so it's insane that I had to spend 40 years and to do this ginormous loop and get another nationality to be able to go back to my—
combat the fragmentation that is there. Yeah.
Astounding. And so when I was able to go back, I said, okay, I don't want to go and be a tourist. I don't want to go and be a tourist and sit around and eat good food and smoke cigarettes and drink arak with my family and, you know, tra-la-la in the tulip fields. I rocked up with like two tall British men. My village was a little bit scandalized, but they were very cool. And one of them is my very good friend, the cameraman, Nick Zajcek, who donated so much of his time and energy and creativity to filming this for me. And my partner who was there is doing like a variety of like millions of different jobs that we just used him every day in a different purpose. But, you know, we didn't have a tripod. Again, we had no funding, no producer, no concept of what the film was going to be. I had no idea. I didn't even know if I was going to be allowed to go. And so when I was there, I said, okay, what can I film? What is the story here? Who are these people? What am I discovering? Who am I? Why am I speaking in this extremely strange Arabic dialect that's super sing-songy, like the mountainous Galilean that my elderly 90-year-old aunt speak is a wonderful type of Arabic that is very deep, and the qa is the ga, I mean, all this wonderful way of speaking, and it just comes out of me naturally, and I sound like a totally different person because I grew up in Beirut, and we do not speak like this in Beirut or Damascus. So I wanted to explore, like, who is Hind in this context, and who are these people? And I got attacked over this actually and criticized, but I wanted to explore only the Christians. You know, not because I'm a believer, not because I think that Christ or the Virgin Mary is a very, you know, huge deal. Maybe they are to millions of people, but because in a way, it's really interesting that this is the birthplace of Christ. My mother is from Nazareth. This is the birthplace of Christ. I'm from Galilee. And now we are only like 1.6% of the population. So the amount of Christians who have had to leave this area over years and years and years and years of struggling and suffering and economic deprivation and the othering and of all types of oppression have left. They've left. So many of my cousins live in Europe. And I wanted to talk about that, you know, that people are always going on about Christ, especially in America. Oh my God, you know, Christ is like this huge thing. So these are the people of Christ. These are the indigenous people who have remained. They're Catholics. They're Mediterranean, and they're gorgeous. Like literally, they're gorgeous. The food, the people, the animals, the light, the cactus, the gorgeous space of this Mediterranean area on the sea. I mean, it's just wonderful. The mountains of the Galilee. And so I was, you know, like a besotted kind of like romantic, you know, it was this insanely romantic notion of, oh my God, this gorgeous space. And of course that changes. And of course, we talk to 14 different characters. You know, we have priests and we have dancers and we have journalists and we have tobacco farmers and we have old ladies who work at home and we have grandmothers and granddaughters and we have teenagers who are very anti-Palestine on some level, and we have all spectrum of opinions. We have radical activists from Haifa who are really pro the cause, and we have people who are very secular and people who are very political, a parliament member as well. And we have people who are very, very religious. And I thought that it would be great to try and write, like, again, a love poem, a love song for this landscape, the geography of it, the light of it, the smell of it, the sound of it. And we didn't have a tripod, which was very interesting. So there's a lot of different aesthetic look to the film. But this film is the polar opposite of Triple Long Exodus because it is a classically filmed, classically shot, very beautifully kind of framed, simple, formal film. It's a formal film. And there is no layering, there is no cartoons, there is no, I'm thinking of adding glitter. Like I'm definitely thinking now of adding some glitter, I have to, but there is no playfulness with the look of the film. It is a challenge to myself to make a leisurely, thoughtful, simple looking, but very, very convoluted structurally, very convoluted thematically film as an homage to this area that I think is astoundingly beautiful. and also criticism of some of the things I found there. And also, I think it's extremely interesting that these are very insular communities that very few people know about. I would have thought that everyone in the world, in the entire 8 billion people world, would know that there are tons of incredible Christian indigenous people in the north. But no one really thinks about them. They're very isolated in many ways. People talk about Bethlehem, people talk about Jerusalem, but they don't talk about Malia, Fasuta, Tarshiha, all these villages I come from. So we have that project. I'm working with Osama Bawardi from Philistine Films, bless him. He's the character of the film. He is a guy, he is also like me, very secular, and he is very loves his country. And he's from Nazareth, he's from my hometown, my mom's hometown. And we're currently in the post-production phase, but we went around many churches, and we talked to a lot of priests, and trying to figure out, mainly answer like this one question, how do they identify themselves? Who are these people and how do they identify themselves? And try to find a way that I belong in that world. And also to showcase the beauty. Like, I don't want to make a hateful film that's against something. I've erased the hate completely. I've erased the other in this film. It's only Palestinians. We don't see anything else. And I only want to focus on the beauty of these people. Yeah. And so that's in a nutshell, They Planted Strange Trees.
Yeah, no, really.
Also based on Genesis, so it's in like 7 sections on Genesis. Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah. So structurally, it's quite convoluted.
Yeah. Oh, I'm very excited for this film. And as you say, I think, when it comes out, it'd be great to see it. And then also, hopefully to hear more about you, about the process, and more from you about the process. And I think also something that, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your work as an editor is really critical to the final product. It's not just the filming. So it'll be interesting, like with your other films that we've talked about, to hear about what you find in the course of that process. So eagerly awaiting that. And again, I think just the diversity of perspectives within the film is really fascinating. And then also it speaks to your breadth as a filmmaker, that you have these different categories and genres. So waiting for that one.
Well, I'm looking for an editor. So if anyone hears this and thinks that they would want to tackle this project, oops, someone's at the door. If they want to tackle that project, they are welcome to reach out to me. And I'm looking for an editor who can handle like a poetic documentary about that region, who knows that well, Right. So anyway, but there was one more thing I wanted to mention before the doorbell rang about this film. I wanted to say that recently, obviously in the past week, things on the ground in that area have changed.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're seeing Haifa in the news, We're seeing all around the north.
Akka, it's a different ethos completely than what I was filming. And so I'm very, very interested in finding a way to tie that in. Because again, like how documentaries, like I say, if you give your documentaries time to breathe and grow, it's a really frustrating thing, because all I want in the world is for this film to have been finished a year ago. But between the pandemic and some other very good corporate projects that I haven't had time to sit and do it, and I want to give it its time. Of course, now that this has happened, and I'm so moved that this has happened, I'm so touched, I'm so inspired that this has happened, I have to find a way to integrate that. Because that wasn't present in the film. Right. That uprising, that solidarity, that speaking out. Just before we began this interview, I watched a girl from Malia, from my hometown, a girl I don't know, speaking out for freedom on the street with a microphone. Like, I'm from Malia and I want justice for the Palestinians. And I'm like, wow, Yeah. So that also will play a part, I think, in the story, because communities evolve, landscapes change. And I think that's why documentary for me is a fascinating and beautiful thing. I'd love to be able to work in fiction. I keep thinking all my friends who've done fiction have been much more successful than I, much more successful, much richer, much happier, maybe, I don't know. But there's something so confining about fiction. You have to write the thing, and then you have to spend 7 years funding it. And then you've got a lot of people involved who have a say. And then it has to conform to a certain kind of blueprint. And I find that I like the chaos of my kind of documentary work more. Where it's not specified what you're doing, but you're just kind of filming something you think is great, and at the end of the day, you take 6 months in the edit room with like a brilliant person with you, and you workshop it. And in Triple Long Exodus, I had Ayman Nahle, who was a brilliant editor and a brilliant thinker, and he was working with me for the whole time. For a year, we worked. And so now, with this project, They Planted Strange Trees, the hope is that I can find someone that I can build the story with.
Yeah.
From
calling editors, calling all editors.
Hello. Yeah.
Interested.
You know, and I mean, this is a good segue, I think, maybe to ending the not that I want to end the conversation, but I think people are like up to the gills now with Hind's life. But really, so sorry, everyone. But you know, I know that you had sent me an idea about talking about a different project, and that's also applicable to that. You know, right, I think this is a great segue.
But yeah, to conclude on another exciting project, one of your works in progress, I believe, is the Poeticians, and I think you had said this is a film that grew out of a spoken word poetry project that you started in Beirut. So could you conclude by telling viewers just a bit about that project and what we can look forward to next with that?
So this is the project of my life. I feel like this is the project of my life. So
just, quickly touch on the project of your life.
Yeah. This is the I think this is where everything I've learned in 20 years of being a filmmaker and a writer is really going to come in with this project. It's called The Poeticians on my website because I don't know what else to call it. But essentially, for the past 8 years, I've been filming, maybe 9 years now, I've been filming for female Arab poets. And they're some of my best friends, my closest friends in the poetry world. Riwa Zainati, Gorewa, Zaina Hashembek, Gozaina, Farah Shamma, Habibti Farah, and Dana Dajani, Godana. So shout out to the ladies. These women have been with me for years in the poetry sphere and also as very intimate female friendships. And they are amazing people and they are amazing writers. And they have a variety of different skills. They act or they perform or they write or they edit or they have journals that they produce or they act or they teach or, but the thing that joins us all is a solidarity in terms of our Lebanese Palestinian background. We're kind of almost split exactly into Lebanese Palestinian, mainly on the Palestinian, and our love of language and our love of freedom. And they're very diverse as people, and their work is very diverse. But I have been following them around the world, and there's a variety of things that happen to them throughout the years. Again, giving it time. The idea is that after 10 years of filming, I would create a 4-part series, 52 minutes each. And Netflix, if you're watching this is really something you're going to want to fund. Again, with no producer and no funding, I'm personally doing this myself and asking friends for help, but I'm collecting interviews with them, moments in their life, a lot of performances, a lot of filming intimate scenes with them and their partners, their children. And one of them came out and one of them, got married and one of them got her heart broken and one of them left the country and they all moved to different, 10 years in the life of very active, strong Arab women who write in English and in Arabic, but mainly in English. And that's going to be a pure video art project. Like that's really where you take all the poetry of these women and all the conversations that we have about sexuality, about life, about religion, about death, about freedom of expression, about purpose, about having children or not having children, about, choices and this region versus living in the West, and our friendships and our thoughts and our moments and our dreams and our heartbreaks. All of that, I think, will be wonderful to be able to put that into visuals. Again, it'll be cartoons, and I've also been filming various countries where I move, so I go around and I film whatever I think will be interesting visually. And it's to recreate the life of these outspoken women in like a poetry film, but over 10 years. And so again, that's hopefully the thing that I will start working on right after I finish They Planted Strange Trees. I also have 2 books I have to write, so it's a little bit. Then my 3rd poetry book is finished, and I need to find like a publisher. And I'm so stressed out because I have 10 years of work that I'd like to accomplish, and this stuff just doesn't get done. Like it takes time, and I'm super impatient and like, miserable like all the time.
And yet so vibrant and interesting to listen to. And I guess a little bit of Schadenfreude. You're such a meticulous editor, and I think I speak for myself, but I think others can relate. You kind of hope when, thinking about interviewing someone like you and thinking, oh, I hope she'll just say, the editing just sort of speaks to me, and that part of the process isn't that hard. And then you hear, oh no, it's miserable, and there's all this work that goes into it.
No, and I have 4 corporate jobs. I just finished 28 films for a museum.
Right, I remember you said for documentary work for
NGO. I work as a translator. I have 162 texts to translate, so I got to make a living. And so I also have all this other stuff. And until I can finish all of that, I need to, But I'm planning to rejoin the creative world, this July, and not look back for a while, and just focus on these films and try to, live in them for a while, and be away from the idea of clients and the deadlines. And so hopefully that will work. But thank you for listening so patiently to all my kind of diverse.
I've really been looking forward to this, and I really want to thank you for this conversation. Perfect note to end on, because we have to let you get back to all your brilliant work. But I'm excited for viewers to gain this insight into your existing work and what's coming next. We'll have links to your films that are available, and I would love to have you back for future conversations. So thank you for being here and for all the beautiful art that you bring into the world through your work.
So much. Thank you. I really just want to make more of it. That's all I want. And I feel like time is running out, and I haven't even done any of the stuff I want to do. So you caught me in a sensitive part of my life, in a sensitive phase where I'm just at the cusp of doing things I love and I'm proud of, and not there just yet. So we won a BAFTA, which is great. I should be proud, but
a lot to
never satisfied. Never satisfied with anything,
I guess that's ambition that probably fuels your work and keeps the momentum going, but I'm sure a little bit tormenting as the creator of the work.
My overachieving parents, super overachieving parents, just a disaster to live with that, really. But also I want to thank anybody who's made it this far in the interview. Has it been an hour and a half now? I don't know. I think my aunt will watch this, but maybe no one else.
No.
I'll let her watch it. But for anybody who's made it thus far, thank you so much for listening. And reach out, if anybody wants to talk about stuff. I'm always happy to listen to people. So if you feel like you connected and you need to reach out, I'm easily findable online. Yeah. Thanks, Carly.
Thank you, Hind.